We'll now continue with our patient journey. This patient who had an interscalene block for right shoulder arthroscopic repair, the surgery is completed and the patient is in recovery. Now, the recovery section needs to be completed in order to have a minimum data set for analysis. The recovery section can be entered by yourself after gathering information from the recovery nurses, or you can personally inquire the patient and enter the data. I often in my practice let the recovery nurses enter the data so that there is less bias in my data entry. Here you can set up a multi-user account and you can let the nurses enter the data independently. So they can log in using their own login and password. This patient details will come up on their screen and they can go into the recovery section and enter the data. Here you can see that the patient info is there, the pre-op data is available, the block details. If you click here, all the data that you have entered is available here. Then you can go into recovery section and then enter the recovery data. Now you can see we do collect on pain score, the optional nausea, vomiting and sedation score, optional time spent in recovery, the analgesia required in the recovery, and some other details of complications in recovery. Click on the button edit and then you can enter. Now, what is the pain score on arrival at 30 minutes or 1 hour, or it could be at the time of discharge if the patient gets discharged before 1 hour. So, if the patient on arrival is 0, maybe 1 or 2, depending on whatever the pain score. So, you need to get this information from the nurses. Now, some of these scores are optional and you can enter if you got the details. You can see that the recovery analgesia is set as default as none. You can choose whatever you've given to the patient, and if the patient has not required any analgesia in recovery, you can enter it as none. Then if you had to do a local anesthetic infusion, you choose this local anesthesia infusion and enter what you had to do. If there is a repeat block, you can click on the repeat block and then do whatever is required. Then you can enter if there were any complications in recovery. Some of the blocks can have delayed complications and you can enter those details here. If there are no complications identified, enter it on none and then click on save. And now when you go back into the screen, you can see that the pre-op, the block and the recovery section is now green, and you can see that the patient sign, the icon here has gone green, which means that the minimum data set required for uploading the data for analysis is complete. Now, if this patient is left on your device, it won't be analyzed. You need to click on this button here to be sent for analysis. Often is the case that we are unable to obtain a complete data of patient follow-up and patient feedback. But at least if we got data until the patient has left recovery, it is good enough for analysis for most of our situations. If you can get follow-up and feedback data, that completes the whole record of this patient, and hence it will be more useful for analysis. If you want to discharge the patient, you can click on the discharge when the patient will be sent for analysis, or else you can continue with your patient follow-up and feedback and then enter a complete data for this patient.